Hey everyone, so I got my Moog Labyrinth a couple months back when it first came out, and I did a quick video on the unboxing and just sort of first impressions that I had. Now that I've had a little bit more time to play with it, I kind of want to show you some of the things it can do. Specifically, I want to show you how it integrates with the Moog Sound Studio. That's one of the biggest questions I get asked is, does it make sense for me to buy this as an extension for my sound studio? So that's what I'm going to do today. I've been playing around with it in my rack, and there's a couple ways that I think it really shines out, and I want to show you some patching with those. So although it's in my big Eurorack setup, I'm going to mostly use the Sound Studio and the Labyrinth. There are a couple of other modules that I like to use a lot with the Sound Studio, mostly PAMs, but I'll highlight that, and hopefully even if you don't have those modules, you can still get some cool ideas for using the Sound Studio with the Labyrinth, or maybe this will help make your decision on whether or not you want to buy the Labyrinth as an extension for the Sound Studio. So before we get to that, make sure you like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Also, if you want to support my channel, there's a few different ways you can do it. Down in the description, there's a link to my Patreon page. I post patch books and I give away modules for tier 3 once a month. If you want to check it out, it's a lot of fun and I hope you join me there. If you are thinking about buying the Labyrinth, I put an affiliate link to Perfect Circuit in the description. You can click through that and it gives me a small tip at no cost to you. But no matter what, just make sure you subscribe so you can see when I put out a new video, because I intend to do more of these. So with all that said, let's go patch up the Labyrinth with our Sound Studio. All right, so let's go through my setup. I have the Labyrinth right down here. And then I have the DFAM, Mother, and Subharmonic right here. I also have the Spectra box, but we're not going to use that today. So as I mentioned, I'm using some other modules, and one of the modules that I want to really highlight is PAM's Pro Workout. I use this on every single patch I do. It's just such a handy clocking source. I really like just having a start-stop button that starts and stops everything. So we're going to be using that today. Another module that I'm going to use today is this. It's a 12 by 12 buffered matrix by Tesseract. This was a DIY module that I put together. It's not terribly expensive. And most of what I'm doing with this, you could accomplish with just a simple multiple like this. But I'm going to be basically routing stuff from PAMs into this, and then you can decide where it comes out of PAMs and where it goes. So to me, this is these two as a combo is such a great complement to the Sound Studio. So I'd really suggest getting something like that. Another module that I'm going to use today is this Warna, which is just a utility mixer. I'm going to be using the center thing. So it's a one-to-one unity mixer. So 4 inputs come into 1 output. I don't even use it that much, but you could use something like, a switched multiple, or a precision adder, or any number of mixers. I mean, you can even use a VCA mixer like this one. So there's all kinds of different options, but that's what I'm going to be using today. And then the last thing that I'm going to use today is this Cumulus. It's an after-later audio clone of Mutable Instruments Clouds. I highlighted this on my Expanding the Sound Studio series. So this is a module, an effects module that I think is really handy and cool. So I'm going to use that today too. But that's it. That out of all my setup, that's the only thing I'm going to use. Oh, and then the Mordax data also for tuning purposes. I really just love this module. Just for the sake of having a tuner that's in your rack, it's worth it. But it's also great for just sort of monitoring voltage and figuring things out. So yeah, anyways, back to the patch. So what I'm going to start by doing, I already reset PAM, so everything's going at a normal level, or just kind of all in unison. So the first thing I want to do is just plug in, we'll get everything wired up. We'll send a steady signal out on every 4 beats going into 1. And then number 2, we'll set that one to go out in 16th notes. And this is what we're going to use to kind of clock everything. We'll set that one into number 2. And so that way you can see how it's going. And then the last thing that I think is really handy coming from PAMs, And of course, with the Sound Studio, you don't even need this. You could just program each of these individual outputs separately. But I like doing it this way. That way, if I want to add swing or something, I don't need to do it to every single output. I can only do it to one. But okay, so this one I'm going to put in number 3. And for number 3, what I'm going to do is put this all the way to the end, because you'll notice it says stop. So whenever I stop it, it'll send out a pulse. Now I'm going to use this to reset everything. So notice nothing's happening, then I hit stop and it sends out that pulse. Now it's really frustrating. I think I've mentioned it in my DFAM tutorial, but I've certainly mentioned in other videos that I hate that the DFAM doesn't have a reset patch point. Super frustrating. That's the one patch point I wish it did have. But the other boxes do have a reset. So let's go ahead and wire those up first. I'm going to plug into here. So this is letter J. So I go to letter J and I'll turn that one to 3. So that means that this output is going to be getting whatever comes out of number 3. And we can send that over into our reset right here of the mother. And that means that the sequence will reset whenever I hit stop. So that means you don't have to, manually reset it every time. And I'm going to go ahead and do that for the others too. Plug it in there and then down into the reset of the Subharmonicon. And then the last one we'll do the same thing, but for our Labyrinth, which is right here. We'll go into the reset there. So now the sequences from all of these will reset whenever I hit stop. Cool, so I got those all wired up. Now let's go ahead and program our clocking sources. We're not going to use the sequencer of the DFAM to start this, but right now we're going to go into the tempo right here of the mother. The second one will go into the clock of the Subharmonicon. And then the last one will go into clock number 1 of the Labyrinth. Okay, so now I just need to make sure that these G, H, and I are set to number 2. Because those are ones that are receiving 16th notes. Now, as I mentioned, one of the things that I'm going to use on this patch is I'm going to use the DFAM just as a grounding kick drum. And we're going to make it a little bit more interesting in a little bit. But for right now, I just want to go ahead and send a beat, the number 1 here, into the trigger of the DFAM. I find that the sequencer of the DFAM is a little bit limiting. So I've been using it just kind of triggering it separately for whatever I want. So that's where we're going to start. Let's start listening to how it might sound. So that right there, that is just the trigger of the DFAM going, and it's just triggering kind of a kick drum sound that I programmed. All right, so first of all, let's dig into having that kick drum going with the Moog Labyrinth, because one of the ways that I think it really shines is having almost like accent notes. It's kind of like the DFAM does that kind of rolling thunder thing. Well, what's really nice about the Labyrinth, it has a similar effect where you have these sort of FM kind of percussive, abrasive sounds, but yet it mixes up the rhythm with its generative sequences. So let's go ahead and start there. We'll hit run stop. So that sounds pretty cool. This is a really basic sound, but you can almost have some of the same controls just like the DFAM. So you can have an envelope amount here. You get noise. In this one, you actually have control over the noise. So that's kind of cool too. Then the sequencer amount is how much the CV from the sequencer impacts things as well. So So right there, I have kind of a DFAM style drum beat mixed in. Like this would almost sound very similar to like the DFAM if you were using the sequencer. But what's great about this is it keeps that steady kick on the downbeat. And then you can control how much this varies things up. And the envelope trig mix allows kind of different velocities to be played. So if I have it set here to say 9 o'clock, that means the hits on these beats are going to sound out really loud with a high velocity, but these will be much quieter, almost like accent notes. So. And it sounds pretty cool too if you turn down the corrupt. Now the corrupt is what makes it generative. It's what changes it up as it goes. So if I turn this all the way down, that's going to stay the same. And this one, if I turn this up, will get a little bit different. So it adds some regularity, but yet some random. And I'm actually going to go ahead and let's speed this up a little bit to 120. Pretty cool. So let's go ahead and add in like the subharmonic on. And so what I've got here is just a basic sequence and patch going. If we go ahead and play it. So that's pretty cool. That just adds some really nice textures. And right now we're not even really doing a whole lot in the way of patching or anything like that. This is just a kick drum coming from the DFAM, the subharmonicon doing its thing, and then the awesome rhythm coming from the Labyrinth. So let's go ahead and add a sort of bass line on the mother. So this is in the key of C. It's just with the C major, so I'll just go ahead and program in something pretty simple. I'm going to give a whole bunch of space to it. All right. That's the bass line. It might even be a little bit too busy, but whatever, let's run with it for now. All right, here we go. So that's pretty cool just as is. Let's have a little bit more fun with it. One thing I think is pretty cool is if we're mixing up this rhythm a little bit, we want to still have that steady beat go, but I want to add in some extra notes to it. So we'll plug it in here and we're going to mix it with a different sound. So right now, because that's just going in here, you should hear it the same way. So listen to the kick. Great. So The other sound that I want is we can take our subharmonic on, and I'm going to use the trigger from sequencer 1. So if we go to sequencer 1 clock, we can take that and plug it in and actually mix the sound with the steady drum beat, with the steady downbeat. So here, let's listen to what that would sound like if I unplugged the steady downbeat. So you'll hear the kick every time this moves forward. But what's great about doing it mixing with it is that since it's not steady, it will sound both of them. You need to set it to something that is a little bit different. So that's just a cool way to get a steady beat, but something that mixes it up a little bit. So let's go ahead and listen to that with our kind of drum beat that's going on with the Labyrinth. Awesome. And of course, you could put all kinds of different modulation sources in here and everything, but that's just one idea for how I think the Labyrinth really shines, is making those sort of accent percussive sounds, very similar to what the DFAM does when it's got its sequencer on. But I just find this to be much more fun to play because you can mix up the rhythms and yeah, it's a lot of fun to play. All right, let me show you a different way you can set things up. I'm going to leave a lot of this wiring in place, and I'm not going to change up the kind of tonality and everything. We're just going to change how we're going to play the Labyrinth with everything. And this is going to be sort of more of an ambient sound. But let's see what comes out of it. I want to get the actual tones coming out of here. So rather than having it be a percussive sound like this, we're going to have this providing this sort of bell-like tones going over everything. So first, we're going to turn this envelope down because this is an envelope that affects the frequency. We don't want that if we're using tonal sounds because otherwise it sounds like, you know, like woo and things like that. So we're going to turn the sequence 1 amount all the way up because that means the voltage from the sequencer will be affecting the frequency. And I'm going to turn this down for now. We'll get to that in a second. That's the FM amount, the frequency modulation. And let's just go ahead and turn the noise down, the ring mod down. Everything's going to be down except for VCO 1 so we can kind of hear what it sounds like. And so you can kind of hear it still sounds a little bit percussive. Let's turn up our envelope decays to see if we can get it to sound a little bit more tonal. So that sounds really pretty. And if we turn the ring mod up, it gives it a little bit more kind of like a metallic sound. For this, let's go ahead and slow it down a little bit to 80. I'll still turn down everything else for right now because we're going to work with the Labyrinth. Anytime you have this kind of ambient thing, it's just like rings into clouds, that kind of classic thing. So let's go ahead and use our Cumulus, plug right into the VCA of Cumulus, and then I'll send the Labyrinth VCA into Cumulus. That's just really pretty. and from there, we can start hooking up patch points. Let's go ahead and let's play everything together. Rather than using the sequence that I programmed, let's go ahead and use the Labyrinth sequencer. We'll use sequencer number 2, and that is sequencer 2 CV. And that's going to be, we're going to plug that into our volts per octave here. So that will control the tones of things. But then to control the actual, to control the trigger, let's go ahead and send it from our Subharmonicon. So let's go with sequencer 2 clock. So we have sequencer 1 clock feeding into the drum beat, and let's have sequencer 2 clock go into the gate. So now you're going to hear whenever this sequencer moves, it's going to trigger the gate, but the notes are going to be played from this one. And what's kind of neat about that is if you set the decay really long, you can actually hear the notes change even when it doesn't trigger. But let's listen to just the mother. So as those kind of like hammer-on sounds, if you like that, it's kind of cool. And that's because the trigger of the envelope is lasting longer than one note. And every time this moves on to a new one, it's going to play a new note. Let's hear it with the drum beat. And it's going to be constantly evolving too, because I have this corrupt on. If I wanted it to stay exactly the same every time, you would just turn this all the way down. let's start hooking up some modulation sources. I'll try to stick, now if you have other modules, you could do all kinds of different modulation, and it's really cool. Let's just go ahead and stick to what's available in the Sound Studio for the sake of this video. So we'll go from the triangle LFO out, and let's send it into the fold. Now, the second when you plug it into the fold here, then this becomes an attenuator. So I'm going to turn that all the way up. That's kind of cool. Another patch point that I wanted to show off, when you use this trigger, it's kind of neat because the sequencer, I'm not a huge fan of it because it doesn't have the reset. But what's kind of fun is if you're using the trigger to actually trigger it, you can use the sequencer to do all kinds of other stuff. So if I turn on the sequencer now, and let's actually make it sync to our clock. So I'm going to go number 4, we'll go advanced step. So now the DFAM is still being triggered by our patching, but now we can program, we have 2 sets of stepped voltage that we can use to sequence other things. And so let's go ahead and have it sequence. You can use it for a sequencer. If you wanted to quantize it, you could. But let's go ahead and send the pitch out to the cutoff of the subharmonic. This kind of sounds pretty cool. So now listen to this. Actually, I'm going to turn down the mother. I'll turn down the labyrinth, and let's listen to just how that affects the sound. Pretty cool stuff. And let's go ahead, and we have another set. We could use the velocity, because I think, actually, I'm going to test this in real time. I wonder if we turn the velocity all the way down, if it'll still trigger. Well, we have to turn the velocity all the way up in order to get that to work, but we can still use our pitch. That's kind of cool. And let's hear everything together. Let's go ahead and send, I like to get some movement into clouds. So I'm going to send, this is a slow moving envelope from the filter. We'll send that into this position. That kind of mixes things up again. And then let's send something else into, you know what we can do? Let's go ahead and multiply the triangle wave. We'll send that down into the density of the cumulus. So let's listen to I was getting a little bit crazy with the FM amount. That can kind of make things sound a little bit less like pretty, but it's still the this VCO level sounds kind of. awesome. Super cool stuff. So there you go. There are a few ideas. I hope you find this inspiring and helpful. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks so much. I'll see you soon.